Well, folks, today is really a special treat because I have one of the most influential and knowledgeable healthcare executives in oncology in the United States of America and someone who once was my boss. He bossed me around, but in a nice way, in a nice way. I mean, Joe was always nice in the way he bossed me around. Like he would tell me what to do with a smile, but I kind of know I have to do it. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. Joe, welcome to the show.
Shadi, thanks for having me. Thanks for the great introduction. And I often thought I worked for you, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. This is the nice way about you. Like, you tell me you're working for me, but we both knew who was really running the show. I like it. I like it. Joe, for folks who just don't know about you a little bit, maybe what are you doing currently? But I'm always curious about your beginnings and how did you really start working in healthcare and all this? You had a long career, but maybe take us a bit into how this all started and what are you doing currently?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Chadi. My name is Joe DePinto. I'm the head of Cell, Gene, and Advanced Therapies at McKesson. My journey has been a 30 plus year career in healthcare. I have worked for large multinational companies, small emerging biotech companies, service providers, venture capital tech companies, and now building out InspiroGene, which is the cell and gene vertical for McKesson. My career, I've always been a very scientifically curious young man growing up. My undergraduate degree is in marketing. I have a master's in pharmaceutical chemical studies. So I did it opposite, right? Most people do science and then an MBA. I did it a little different. I did the business degree, always scientifically curious, and then a business sort of science master's program. Because at that time I was working for Johnson and Johnson and I was loving it. I loved what I did. I've done everything career-wise from sales to sales leadership to sales training to marketing leadership to global marketing to drug development and then transitioning from the emerging biotechs to service providers, looking at how can I service biopharma companies and provide them with services and solutions so that their products could reach more and more patients. The one key component for me has always been very patient-centric. I've been blessed. I've worked with some great people over the years, you included, that have really helped me sort of help patients achieve groundbreaking success with different products that I've been able to work with. Mostly in the oncology, hematology side throughout my career, but it's really been an unbelievable 30 plus year journey.
And Joe, my understanding from InspiroGene is almost like a startup within a big company because you came in and you started the InspiroGene, of course, with the support of McKesson, but you kind of started this. So what exactly do you do? Take me through like your day to day. How does your day to day look in terms of what you're trying to do and what are the things that you're attempting to accomplish of InspiroGene? Almost like what's the vision of that entity?
Yeah. So you're right. InspiroGene is the cell and gene vertical within McKesson. So what we have at McKesson is, I like how you phrased it as a small startup. I was employee number one at InspiroGene when I came. And the first period of time was set the strategy. What will the strategy be for McKesson assets in the cell and gene space? And what I mean by that is McKesson has a vast array of assets. Where I'm so pleased and fortunate to work at McKesson because of the array of assets we have. Everything from distribution, logistics, patient access assets to care delivery like US Oncology and Sarah Cannon. So a vast array of assets, some that I could never have ever thought I would have access to help make sure that cell and gene therapy stakeholders like manufacturers and providers and payers have access. So what InspiroGene does is we act as an ally for our stakeholders, whether that be the manufacturers, biopharma companies, providers, healthcare providers who deliver cell and gene therapy, and payers who often pay for the cell and gene therapies commercially. So That's what we set forward to do strategically is how do we utilize our core distribution assets to really best position McKesson to be an enabler or an ally in the value chain and delivery of these complex therapeutics.
I asked this question, Joe, for I've interviewed a lot of folks who are like startups and founders and all of this. And one of my favorite questions to ask is kind of what surprised you the most as you were starting? Because, there's always, there's so much you could tell about what you're supposed to do and how you're going to do it. But what surprised you as you started? And whether it's positives, negatives, challenge, whatever it is, but kind of the top couple of things that really come to mind.
So when I started out 3+ years ago here at McKesson building InspiroGene, I've been engaged in cell and gene therapy pretty closely since 2011. So I knew the market, I knew the marketplace and the cell and gene therapy ecosystem. I was really learning McKesson as an organization, and McKesson is a large Fortune 9 company, right? So a lot of resources, a lot of assets, and a lot of different organizations. And, as I did my diligence externally, I saw the potential. But then as you get into a company and you sort of pull the covers back and you start to dig in and you say, oh, we do this too. Oh, this is another asset that we have that's a resource for manufacturers. And I started putting the pieces together of the puzzle and saying, hey, here's the challenges in the delivery of cell and gene therapies in the value chain. What assets do I have to help deploy so that I could alleviate some of the challenges for manufacturers, biopharma companies, providers, and payers? I would uncover another gem and another gem, and I would be like, wow, that's unexpected. That's great. Now, how do I sort of cell and geneize that asset to meet the needs of the key ecosystem stakeholders? Because it's a vast ecosystem in cell and gene therapy, and you need multiple partners typically if you're a manufacturer or if you're a provider to help the patients get access to these products. I was putting together all these pieces, seeing I have more and more pieces of the puzzle. And
Right.
it's because I uncovered these assets within this large multinational company like McKesson.
So I just for folks who are listening or viewing this, give me just examples of what we mean by cell and gene therapy, because I mean it's very thing. I mean, give us maybe. I mean, is cell therapy the same as gene therapy? It says cell and gene therapy. Can you give an example of what we're talking about in terms of drugs right now or type of therapeutics?
Yeah, no, great question. And oftentimes, unfortunately, cell and gene therapies are lumped together and they're very different, right? They're very different components of care, right? So cell therapy, think about it as advanced treatments or even cures of some diseases that really look at the microenvironment of the cell and how we manipulate the cells out of the body or even in the body to within viral vectors or with other agents to really impact how the cell reacts in treating diseases. On the gene side, with the human genome and us understanding more and more how genes act, you can look at genes manipulate, genes edited or genes replaced that treat rare gene abnormalities. And in these products, while they're often lumped together, they often act very differently.
Right.
And the other component here is this science here is so groundbreaking, Chadi, as you know, that these areas are actually treating high unmet medical need areas, as well as they're ultimately some patients are being cured by these interventions. So the science and the clinical promise is tremendous. And it's really exciting to be part of a space, especially for a scientifically curious guy like myself, that really is making an impact on patient care.
You know, it's really interesting when I look at your role, Joe, because you're not really making the drugs. You're not administering the drugs, but your role is so important for the drugs to be received by the people that need them. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because I think we don't sometimes appreciate the importance of that vehicle of delivery.
Yeah, so you're right. We don't, at InspiroGene by McKesson, we don't make any of the drugs. We act as an enabler. So we provide services and solutions, whether that be distribution services or perhaps patient access services, or perhaps even data services to help understand where the patients exist. All those services are provided to the manufacturers who are our customers and the providers who ultimately use the product, right? So some of those services could be everything from a third-party logistics organization that does order to cash, revenue recognition, allows healthcare professionals to order the product through a technology platform. So that way it's streamlined with the manufacturing ordering process. On the patient access side, we do everything from a case management standpoint of benefit verification and benefit approval and prior authorizations, because these products tend to be individually for a specific patient and tend to have a different delivery system. Some may be given where the patient starts with the raw material of the product. So it's not linear, the
Mhm.
supply chain. It's more circuitous in nature. So we also help in the manufacturers and the providers track and trace and be able to deliver the product appropriately. So depending upon the different product, depending upon the therapeutic area, we will engage differently. But think of us as a solutions provider or that helps our manufacturers deal with the complexities
Right,
of delivering this high science.
right. So let me step back a little bit. I'm trying to understand, um, how many products are we talking about? Do you think we're going to have more cell and gene therapies in the future? The reason I ask is because back in the day when I first started my career, there were probably one oral chemotherapy drug, by the way. There was no cell and gene therapy. There was no CAR T. There was none of that stuff. What are we talking about? Like what are we talking about today and what are we talking about in the future? Kind of quantify for me. I don't want to say the market size. It's really more, you know, are we going to have more cell and gene therapies in the future? Like why? Like what's happening in the marketplace?
So I think it's important to step back and see where we were to where we're going. So, like you said, when you started your career, one chemotherapeutic, right? So you have small molecules, right? That's how this all started. I think when you think about first, when you think about cell and gene, it's sort of the third wave of innovation. That first wave was small molecules, chemical-based products that help to treat diseases. Then it evolved to biologics, where there are more targeted therapies. That was the second wave of innovation. These biologics tended to be more focused, less promiscuous, less side effects, and a better efficacy rate. Now you have the third wave of what we call precision medicine, cell and gene therapeutics. And these cell and gene therapeutics have a high degree of clinical efficacy, really targeted for the individual patients that they're treated based on a specific gene mutation or based on autologous cells that are pulled or allogeneic cells that are utilized or tissue. So this is how this has evolved. So that sets the foundation of this third wave of innovation. To answer your specific question on will there be more, we're still very much in the early days of cell and gene therapy. Right now, as of today, when we're taping this, there are 40 plus cell and gene therapies approved in the United States. Prognosticators say that as they look at pipelines of US biopharma companies, that we can expect 10 to 20 approvals a year from now to the next 5 years at least, based on the current pipelines. You have around 700 clinical trials that are in late stage development for cell and gene therapy. Late stage for cell and gene is phase 2 and phase 3 because some cell and gene therapies get approved on expedited review off of a phase 2 pivotal trial. So I think that the future is quite bright as the science continues to evolve for precision medicine. And clearly, the FDA and other agencies are preparing for 10 to 20 approvals a year over the next 5 years. On a base of 40, you do the math, we're now starting to get to close to 100 FDA approved products in the US in the cell and gene space. Also, as we've done some analysis here at InspiroGene, and we think about the future of pipelines for the biopharma company, by 2030, you can see close to 25% of biopharma pipelines being focused on cell and gene therapy because the science is exciting, the disease areas have high unmet medical need, and the ability to see these impacts on clinical efficacy have been unparalleled in the cell and gene space. So it's an exciting time. I think that we're still very much in the early days of it. And now is where we need to set that foundation.
So you mentioned, I mean, this is very important, but you mentioned that you're providing solutions. So tell me the problems that you're trying to solve for. Solutions exist because there are problems. So what are these top like 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever number of problems that that the cell and gene therapy market faces, and how are you solving for these?
Yeah. So we at InspiroGene, we've taken our strategy from a provider's lens. Like, so the healthcare provider has set the foundation for our strategy. And we talked about the fact that many of these cell and gene therapies don't have a linear value chain. It tends to be circuitous in nature, where along the way, there are challenges, whether that be manufacturing challenges, whether it be apheresis challenges, whether that be access challenges at the academic centers that typically deliver these products. What I mean by access is we just talked about how many clinical trials there are, and there's commercial patients as well. Where do all these patients get treated? So right now, the majority of cell and gene therapy is being delivered in the hospital. So we're seeing a migration of cell and gene therapy to community hospitals.
Right.
So we help provide that infrastructure and solutions around order to cash, the ordering system, to track delivery of these products, to make sure that the appropriate patients set up the reimbursement challenges that exist, because these products tend to be a little bit higher priced and they don't quite line up with the US reimbursement system, because what happens is many of these are one-time products. So you have a cost density year one, and the benefits are seen over multiple years. That's very different than our US payer system is set up. So we help them deal with that. We have the ability, because of where we sit in the value chain, to see a variety of stakeholders. And what we do is try to streamline with our different assets how these sites treat, right? So you could use our 3PL. You could use our specialty distribution for distribution of this product. You could also use our specialty pharmacy if that's what's needed, right? And then we have developed a new asset to meet the needs of the cell and gene space, especially in helping to manage the case management of the patient, which is InspiroCare, which is our cell and gene specific hub that will do a lot of the legwork for reimbursement, benefit verification, benefit approval, prior authorization work, and make sure that that patient's travel, logistics, and much of that, their care is managed in that fashion. We do that typically on behalf of the biopharma companies.
Do you anticipate different kind of problems as we progress forward, as we have more of these newer therapies? Are these the major issues, or are you anticipating some additional problems that you need to solve for?
So I think we've made some headway and some progress with the initial set of challenges, right? And I do think that some of these challenges that will come in the future will be as the science moves from perhaps autologous to allogeneic patient population, right? To allogeneic products, that We're starting to see more and more sophistication around the delivery of these products through cold chain. And will we need to store some of these products? There comes a lot of additional gear. I'll call it gear with cell and gene. How they're delivered, whether it's cryo or cold chain, right, through dewars. So we've developed some infrastructure and property, plant, and equipment to deal with cold chain storage and warehousing for manufacturers so that the product can be delivered just in time, so that the sites of care don't have to store all this and have all the gear on hand. Because, as you know, these institutions, space is a premium, and they want to use the space to treat patients, and I don't blame them.
That's really interesting. Having the drug available when you need it without having to store it for a long time. That's that's not an easy feat. I mean, that's really pretty challenging.
No, it takes quite a bit of coordination, quite a bit of planning, and quite a bit of understanding intimately the patient journey and the product journey, because there's interaction between the two and levers that need to
So
be.
do you interact with patients directly? Is there a situation where you're interacting with patients directly in terms of education, things of that nature? Are you providing services directly to patients?
We do in SpiroCare in our hub, in our cell and gene therapy hub. We provide that benefit verification, education, a lot of the reimbursement and copay work. We also provide some assistance in travel and logistics as they travel to academic sites for treatment. Yeah, so we do have that interaction through InspiroCare, which is our newly developed hub that we put in place just to treat cell, gene, and advanced therapies.
So one of the things I've noticed, and I don't have an actual quantification of this, but I did notice, I believe that cell and gene therapy are not as ubiquitous in the community setting as anticipated. I'm forgetting, but I was listening to a lecture, and the lecturer, who's well versed in cell and gene therapy, was commenting on the fact that there's probably about one quarter, one quarter of patients that are eligible for CAR T therapy, they are actually not receiving CAR T or not even being referred to be considered for CAR T. Why is that? Like from where you sit, how much of this is education, where the physicians, for example, maybe don't have a lot of understanding of the importance of CAR T versus the logistics, the transport, the other stuff where most patients want to be treated locally. They just don't want to travel. I can't wrap my head around it. I was struck by the fact that 1 out of 4 patients could be eligible for a therapy that could possibly be life-saving, and they're not getting it.
Yeah, so we your statistics are very similar to the statistics we've done in our research. So in October of last year, McKesson published our first 2024 cell and gene therapy report. It was primary research with 120 plus treating oncologists and referring oncologists. And we chose oncologists because they were most familiar with the cell and gene space, so hematologist, oncologist. 99% of the physicians we polled felt that cell and gene therapy represented one of the most significant medical innovations of its time, right? 99%. So they're very excited about the scientific innovation. However, when we polled them around awareness of cell and gene therapy, only 47% of the oncologists said that patients rarely or never are aware that cell and gene therapies are available for their condition.
Yeah.
And 64% of those oncologists said that cell and gene therapies are not easily accessible for patients. 3 out of 5 of the oncologists we polled, 60%, say that when they referred a patient for cell and gene therapy, they often received another treatment. It could be a different indirect competitor, right? So that lines up with what you've seen. This is all data we published in October of last year in the McKesson Cell and Gene Therapy Report. Our plan is to continue to have these reports yearly and track our progress. I think some of it has to do with, in some of these patient populations, the patients sit in the community and they have to be referred to academic centers for treatment. On our website at InspiroGene.com, you can see a map of the United States. And you can see by geographic metropolitan area where cell and gene therapy gets treated. And you can see significant treatment deserts
Right.
because geographically, we know that when a patient has to travel greater than 50 miles and stay for an extended period of time, they opt out of cell and gene therapy for another alternative.
Yeah.
That lines up with the research. So I think some of the challenge that is seen in the marketplace is this referral process and the patients having to travel to sites of care. How we see that alleviating is we see a migration occurring in the United States of cell and gene therapy treatment sites from the academic to community hospitals and even community clinics. So we're starting to see that migration occur. And as that accelerates, the hope is that getting treatment close to home will alleviate some of those opt-out solution situations where patients opt out for another therapeutic intervention.
That's actually key because again, the number of sites that are authorized to actually deliver CAR T therapy is just, I think it's 100 sites or 109 sites, something like this across the US, I believe. Don't quote me on it, but this is, again, I heard it from the same speaker. But clearly, there are, I mean, 100 sites or even 120 sites across the United States of America. They're very few.
Yeah, I mean, we last year in preparation for this report, Chadi, the team did an extensive research project in web scraping and looking at all of different data sets of where was cell and gene therapy delivered in the United States. And we put this map on the website and we update the map quarterly, right? To see how we're progressing here with, and we didn't do it by hospital, we did it by geographic metropolitan area. So in Chicagoland, you can press
Right.
the dot and the six hospitals, and I'm not sure it's six, but how many ever hospitals in Chicago will come up with the listing of that's ever given a cell and gene therapy, right? And our hope is to continue to use this as a resource for all in the healthcare ecosystem, right? And my hope is that soon we'll make that web page obsolete because cell and gene therapy will be delivered locally. And hopefully we're giving that local care and that access to the patient locally so their caretakers don't have to travel with them, that they're closer to home to deliver care, and you can get quality care for cell and gene therapy locally.
The InspiroCare, which is the division that is responsible for the hub and following up with patients, do they actually follow up patients longer term or just until they get therapy, or like what's for how long patients are followed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when you look at the FDA requirements for cell and gene therapy, they've stated that there's a need for a long-term 15-year follow-up for these patients. On our roadmap for InspiroCare, we certainly, and because of the unique assets that McKesson has around data, we clearly have that on our roadmap as a future functionality. We haven't started that yet. Remember, we're only at this for 3 years at this point. So we're at our initial launch phase, but that's definitely on the roadmap. We see that as a need, and the market sees it as a need, right? Long-term follow-up and looking at outcomes management and managing those outcomes and helping our biopharma partners report those outcomes is going to be really critical, especially as you have to follow the patient over a long period of time. They tend to move over a long period of time, right? So they get treated at different centers.
I mean, these treatments I mean, expensive, and they're also very specialized. I mean, in the autologous type of therapies, they're very specific to that patient. They're not the allogeneic type of cellular therapies or CAR T. So, that delivery piece, the ability to get that to the patient is instrumental because otherwise it's really a waste to the system and waste for the manufacturer, waste to the institution, and also the patient doesn't get the treatment that they want. I mean, you probably carrying the most expensive asset could be carried. from what point A to point B.
Yeah, that's a very true statement you just stated. I like to think of it this way in the simple terms for your audience that's not familiar with cell and gene. Autologous, think about it as one to one. Allogeneic could be one to many, right?
Right.
You get one to many. And it's really important that when we work with our biopharma manufacturers, that we are the enabling arm to make sure that the right product gets to the right patient in the right space at the right time and
Mhm.
help them achieve that because your product is for you. My product is for me in an autologous setting. In an allo setting, very different. Allo has the promise of one to many. But you know what, Johnny? If you've seen one autologous or allogeneic product, because of the variations, you've seen one. There are matched allo patients that act, and there are some gene therapies because of the use of apheresis in gene therapy that act like autologous. So our approach is always to help our biopharma clients understand how we see the value chain from the patient journey, the product journey, and the reimbursement journey. So we can provide them our recommendation on their best market access strategy. That's what we do in a nutshell.
What other areas of cell and gene therapy that someone like me, I mean, again, I'm a physician, I'm in the healthcare, but I was never in your role where I'm responsible for that, like logistics, delivery type of thing, which is so important. And other people who are listening that they probably don't understand or you would like to share with them, whether it's complexity, whether it is importance. But you've done this long enough where you realize that occasionally folks who are very just focused on one part of the healthcare process, they may not really understand what's happening outside of their ecosystem. I guess it's really an open-ended question. I mean, because I want to make sure that you share whatever you want to share with me and listeners and viewers that we may completely not know about cell gene therapy and what you guys are doing.
I think that when you think about the complexity of the science of cell therapy and gene therapy, it transfers to the delivery of care. We talked a little bit about temperature control. Some of these products may be frozen, some may be fast frozen, some may be cryo, some may need to be delivered in a fashion where they don't shift or rock in any way because the cells can be degraded. All that complexity needs to be taken into consideration, especially when the product starts at the hospital, taken out of the patient in apheresis, goes to a manufacturing center, is manipulated, maybe perhaps stored for a period of time. Sometimes it could be 21 days, sometimes it can be several months.
Right.
Then that product has to be delivered back to that patient. Coordination that the patient is at the hospital at the right time, because this product cannot be left out in conditions, oftentimes for an extended period. So there's a lot of logistics, distribution logistics, coordination, and really a high degree of understanding intimately the specificity needed for that particular product. Now, when the product's being used in rare diseases and the products are being used in smaller patient populations, you can do that one to one on a one-off basis. But as the science of this area moves to like autoimmune disease,
Mhm.
cardiovascular disease, neurologic diseases, these are bigger patient populations. So we really have to help to industrialize the delivery of these products through the value chain. And that's the role that InspiroGene powered by McKesson plays. That's the role that my cell and gene staff, who are all well trained in cell and gene therapy, all have experience in cell and gene therapy, help the manufacturers and the providers navigate. That's what we do.
Is there any question I should have asked you that I completely forgot or overlooked and I should have asked you that you think is very important?
So for us, it's where we're headed, right? I love building, and I build for what's now, but I always have my eye out for the future. And for us, the future is to continue to develop and build the team of cell and gene therapy experts. And how do I continue to use technology and digitization to help to make sure that the complexity of the value chain are addressed in a transparent way where all the key stakeholders know all along the path where the product is. And then the build out of our property, plant, and equipment around cold chain storage and warehousing, because each of these products has unique cold chain needs. And sometimes they need specific kitting or repackaging that needs to occur. And we should be able to be a resource to those manufacturers, because the hospitals, they can't hold this
Yeah.
in their hospitals for extended periods. By the way, we're not going to have pallets of this stuff either, but
Yeah.
we should be able to maneuver for our manufacturers, so that way when the patient gets to the site for delivery of care, that the product's there just in time, and we should be the coordinating arm for that. So we're always looking out at the science in the future, and what capabilities will we need to enable for the value chain to industrialize. You can build this one product at a time, or you can look at a way where you can make the system fit in an industrialized fashion for 80% of what's needed, and then configure for the other 20 based on individual capabilities and needs of the product. That's what I'm looking for in the future.
That's really amazing. I mean, I have so much appreciation to the delivery process that admittedly before I left academic practice and I didn't understand how important that is until you really realize the effort and how much it takes to get that to the patient. Any final thoughts before I let you go to change the world?
Well, I don't know about that, but it's always great. I've had a chance. I'm a fan. I've had a chance to listen to your podcast, and I've
Thank
heard
you.
the topics, and you're very topical, right? You talk about CRISPR, you talk about AI, you talk about technology, you talk about science. But Chadi, the one thing I love about you and your podcast and what you do is it's always about the patient, right?
Right.
You're a very caring provider of care for the patient. And I want you to know that we put the patient first in everything we do at InspiroGene. If we're not sure the decision to make, what's best for the patient is the decision we'll make. And that's how, as an ecosystem in cell and gene therapy, we're going to be successful. Collaboration around what's best for the patient. Not one company can do this on their own. We need to be collaborative. Payers working with providers, working with manufacturers, so that these patients can get access to this groundbreaking science. Remember, I started this by telling you I was scientifically curious. The art of the possible here with cell and gene therapy is significant. And our role at InspiroGene is to be that enabler and to help the patients. So that's sort of how I summarize things. Is it's always been about the patient, always will be.
Well, if anybody is going to help patients, it's you. I've known you for a long time, and I really believe that you will continue to deliver for the patients because, as I tell my listeners all the time, we are all patients. I mean, the reality is we all are either current, future, or past patients. And what that means, at some point, we may need the exact treatment that we are now helping patients receive, and we would like to have someone on the other side that's advocating for us and trying to get us what we actually need. So I appreciate what you're doing day in and day out, Joe.
Well said. I appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing and the vision of what we want to do in the future with you and your listeners.
Thank you so much for listening and for watching the Healthcare Unfiltered podcast. I appreciate your support and your feedback. You can follow me on Twitter at Shadi Nabhan or on Instagram, Shadi_Healthcare Unfiltered. You can send me your comments and suggestions on either social platform or email me at shadinabhan00, that is the letter OO, @outlook.com. Don't forget to check out my books, The Cancer Journey, Understanding Diagnosis, Treatment, Recovery, and Prevention, and Toxic Exposure, the true story behind the Monsanto trials and the search for justice, both published by Johns Hopkins University Press and available everywhere in the US and Europe. And if you like what you read, don't forget to drop me a review on either book. While we're talking about reviews, Also, don't forget to review this podcast, share it with your friends and colleagues, and let them know about this episode and about past and future episodes that are in the pipeline. Before I let you go, I'm going to leave you with a saying by Brené Brown. There is no innovation and creativity without failure. Period. Until next time, take care.